From the First Noel Chronicles. It is interesting to note that the Order of Heraldus is perhaps the last remaining thread of a completely trusted institution to exist from the elder days in today's Atalan Alliance. Revered by all, even across the now separate kingdoms that once made up Atalan once united, not even the Magi or Shepherds are viewed with such goodwill as an Heraldus rider entering a town or village. Long ago, they served Atalan once united, bringing correspondence, messages, communiques, and often even simply gifts, borne on the backs of their majestic unicorn steeds. Like most things in the years since the fall of the two armies in the fields of Camelin 16 years before, and the armistice between Mezanin and the Atalan alliance that followed, they too have found themselves with but a degree of the influence and power they once held. But hold it, they still do. What irony then, or perhaps it was fitting, that they would be unwitting bearers of what was to befall that which was once Atalan once united. Myas Wynn. This is The First Noel by A. Diallo Jackson. Chapter 3. The Promise. Brid. Help me. The warm winter wind all but whispered as it wound through the everwood trees, lining either side of the Silvern Road, leading away from the town of Western Terrus's edge, and the Orium of Mirmon Mend. In fact, Bridain thought, at least for a moment, that a whisper was precisely what she had heard just above the steady nighttime breeze, but then quickly dismissed it as the rustling of branches and the whistle of the wind. Walking the rugged, unmarked path just off the main thoroughfare wasn't the wisest of things for her to do. It was quiet, as one should expect, as any creature that claimed the day as theirs was working its way through the depths of slumber. Except this, it was too quiet. It was more a stillness. It felt to her like an oppressive hush pressed down upon all that surrounded the whispering woods. There should have been a soft hoot of an owl or the brittle thrill of a nightjar nestled high up in the branches. Even the stuttering chirp of grasshops from long stalks of forest green. But there was nothing, just stillness, as if the forest itself were holding its breath. It had never felt like this before. It was strange to her that she would even take notice. Not right now with so many other present and more pressing matters of import. It was not quite alarming. It was simply odd. Whatever it was unsettling. It was far from normal for her to be out here, now in the dead of night. But then again, what do I know of normal, she thought. She had always run as fast as she could from the expected and the mundane. Why should now be any different? The strange feeling of the looming woods didn't much matter for her now either way. She was just glad to be gone, to be outside of the Orium walls. She couldn't slip away from the Moronite celebration and her fellow students fast enough. She wouldn't even call them friends. She refused to, all but Will. But now, look at us, she thought, at each other's throats. It had been like that more and more these past few months. She wasn't sure if it was her or him, the source of it, but she didn't much care to fix it either. She just wanted it to go away. Magus Nasir hadn't seen her, or at least she hoped. Nevertheless, Knowing Magus Nasir, she did, the proverbial shackle in the form of an old Felidane woman who would probably be looking for Brid. And thus Brid needed to make sure she was back before anyone bothered or felt compelled to look for her. She hadn't quite expected Magus Nasir to be here, but then again, where else would she have been? Always hovering over Wilt and finding any way she could to get between Brid and even the slightest hint of freedom. Brid hated it when the other students called Wilt chosen, but she couldn't deny all the same that the Felidane Magus was far from impartial when it came to him. Of course she would be there to watch over the final testing, and of course Brid would be irritated by even Magus Nasir's proximity and always watching eyes. Her mind spun itself in circles, making her chest grow tight and then breathing short and sharp. Breathe. Remember to breathe. Brid let out a sigh through pursed lips and round puffed cheeks. Whether her eyes were closed or open made no difference in the darkness. The only distinction visible was the silhouette of trees cutting through the starry night sky, a sky that somehow felt more dim than it should have been. It was probably just her mood. She chose to be out here now, but if she had had her way, this was the last place she wanted to be. If her life had gone the way she had dreamed, any one of the nights she had spent peering out the windowsill, it would have been some far-off place. Arn, Kailadon, by Nios himself, even Mezzanine. Just not here. Anywhere but here. In the distance behind her, the flickering lights of the sleeping town of Western Terrus signaled far-off safety. As she stepped off the road and into the darkness, she already feared she might be too late. She hoped not, but she never could quite figure out how to be on time anyway, let alone now when the overwhelming darkness seemed to obscure the passing of time. Stiff fingers cradled a ceramic vase, and the letter. A surge of panic. She patted the area over her heart where earlier she had folded it and slid it into her cloak's inner pocket. Reassured it was still secure, she then pressed the vase tighter, closer to her chest. It was too warm to wear her cloak tonight, but she needed something a bit more gentle and secure to cradle tonight's precious cargo. With a steady hand and an awkward bend of her elbow, Bridain reached over her shoulder and found the top of her windstaff. Her fingers moved slowly, tracing the etchings carved into the wood, every groove, edge, and winding line. A flood of memories. But only one that truly mattered. There he sat, cross-legged on the cold, grained stone hearth in front of a slowly burning home fire. It had been winter then. No. Autumn? Over one eye, fastened with a strap of leather around a mop of graying hair, he wore a thick spectacle of round glass. He measured each and every movement of his mallet and chisel as he carefully chipped and shaped away small slivers of wood. Raising the staff up, he examined his work. He blew away a sheen of fine dust, then held it level, eyeing the length of it. "Beautiful," he said. Bridain peeked over his shoulder to see the etchings for the very first time. Yes, she remembered with certainty now. It had been autumn, the last few seasons before she left to live and train at the Orium of Mirmon Men. Just like Mother, her young voice shook. 10. She had to have been 10. "Yes," he said. He reached back to cradle her head. She nuzzled into his arm and melted down, her chin resting on his broad shoulder. "Just like your mother." Her next remembrance was that of a silence filled with sadness, the weight of a recent loss. It matched the one she felt now, tonight, as she walked the path alone holding the vase. He looked at her as if to fill the quiet. He lifted the staff, then took 2 sharp practice swings and a short bursting forward thrust. Always the warrior first. "Look," he said, lifting the staff to eye level. A hollow had been carved into the center, and Bridain watched as the light from the room slipped down into its recessed darkness. "Watch." He raised it to his lips, half hidden behind his graying beard, and positioned his thick, callous fingers just so. A measured inhale, followed by a gentle puff. It was a sweet note. A smile began to break across her now adolescent face. "Now you try." The note tonight in the forest was just as flat as it had been back in the hearth. "Remember what I always said," his voice said, echoing from the past. "When all else fails, simply close your eyes. Listen through your body. It will never steer you wrong." Now, a warm forest breeze floated in as she wriggled her fingers, checking her breath. She closed her eyes. She brought the hollowed tip of the windstaff to her lips and played a note. Not flat, not bitter. It was a pure, melodic sound. Then another. Her fingers, independent of one another, moved and shifted, upward, sliding down, press, hold, life. The notes came effortlessly now, the tune she had always played. Then, a flicker. One, and another. 5 small firelight flies began to gather near the end of her windstaff. They hovered and shivered along with the sound. She smiled. It only ever happened when she was alone, when the firelight flies would visit, never from within her room or in a winding hall of the Orium. Even when she was out at the edge of the Orium that touched the forest or just beyond the stables or beside one of the outer gardens, only sometimes would they come. It was always this song, only ever this one, the one she had hummed as a little girl, the one her mother had helped her refine into the beautiful notes her father had played and taught her. She didn't know why they came. She only knew it meant she wasn't truly alone. But then came the flood of memories again, and the longing and the pain remembered. "I will return. Don't you worry, little bean." She sighed, and then he was gone. It had been almost 1 year. The very thought of it tripled her heart's aching. She wondered if all that knew her had lied when telling her the pain would eventually fade. So far, it hadn't. She wasn't sure that it ever would. "Gather yourself," she muttered. "When you see him, you have to be strong." She resecured the windstaff and straightened herself up, then continued forward. Her boots swished lightly through knee-high reeds. The reed bed thickened as she moved deeper into the woods and away from the main road. Dew had already begun to form on the blade-like stalks. The oddly warm night air, cooled just enough by the late hour, had drawn the droplets early, coating the forest floor in a shimmer of watery beads. She remembered the spot. She had found it first long ago, back when she was just a little girl, and he, a good 5 years older. They would come here to play, seeking refuge from a home with a dying mother and a father full of fret and an uncertain future. Finding the clearing, however, based only on her recollections, made things a bit more difficult, even for someone like her, whose eyes adjusted to the dark quicker than most. The dew made the decaying leaves and dirt forest floor slightly muddy, but that only helped. Tracking, picking up a trail like this, it was almost too simple. By the look of the path, only a few travelers or passerby would have come this way in the few days and nights prior. Good, she thought. It would be easier to find him. By the light of the waning moon, she made out 4 sets of footprints. 2 of them were humankin, probably some traveling merchant or perhaps even a pilgrim. Not too far-fetched, it being this time of year, taking a shortcut on their way to the Sylvan Road. The footprints possessed the distinct shape of leathered boots with soft soles, yet thicker stitching on the sides. The other set, the fresher of them, were from hooves. She was fairly certain it was him, and it gave her some reassurance she had come the correct way, or at least that he was nearby. The hooves were spaced closely together, telling her the steed he rode had a slow and steady gait when it had passed through. He was not in a hurry. Yet. And then she turned to the last of the tracks. Her pace quickened at the sight of them before she steeled her resolve. She hoped it had gone by long before now. Her jaw clenched, the hairs on her neck jolting to attention. Eyes darted back and forth, scanning the dark just beyond, off the trail behind the trees. She quickly turned to assure herself she was still alone, that she wasn't being hunted. Help me. A moment of growing ease. Nothing there. She looked ahead again and picked up her pace. They were the distinct padded paws and claw indents of a wolf, and by the looks of its paw imprint, it was at least 3 times her size. It was no average wolf. It was likely a dire wolf or something even more deadly. She had learned quite a bit in her candidate training in the pursuit to become a full-ranking shepherd, but she wasn't sure she was willing to take on something of that size alone. Not tonight. Never mind that it shouldn't be so close to the Orium or town. One day, she was certain she'd take one on, show everyone what she's made of. I don't need them, I'll show them. Just not tonight. It made her sojourn out here now even more foolish than it already was. She stopped, rolled her eyes, and looked upward toward the night sky. Stupid Brid, she said. Stupid, stupid, dumb, stupid Bridain. She grunted a determined groan, then continued ahead. A dim light seemed to float between the silhouette of the trees, just around the curve of the path. It was a soft, mostly white glow with just a shade of blue. Bridain's pace quickened. It had to be him. She would feel a bit foolish if it wasn't. To tell the truth, even if it were someone else that she wasn't expecting, she would still be relieved. It was dark and alone out here. An enemy with a blade would be nearly as welcome because it wasn't just her alone and whatever creature the forest meant to eviscerate her alive. Perhaps, maybe not so much that thought, but the thought of someone, anyone besides herself, she found comforting. "Elaine!" she shouted. The light grew more intense. She didn't hold back, and was probably just a bit too eager, no matter. "Brother!" There he was, finally, but almost immediately her excitement faded. Elaine wasn't dressed in his regular, everyday, somewhat unassuming clothes. Shining silver armor covered his chest, forearms, and shins. Beneath it, he wore a familiar green tunic. This was not what she had expected to see, not in the least, not tonight. It was so unexpected that she almost didn't notice he sat atop a tall, thinly built, regal unicorn. "Argo?" she said. "What is she doing here?" The hoof indentations he had seen earlier were thinner than a horse's, and they didn't rest as deep in the earth as a horse's would. She had been so caught up in the fear of the surrounding dark and possibility of some creature of the night setting upon her that she didn't even contemplate the obvious that was right before her. A soft, faint glow bathed the area, gently forcing back creeping shadows from the trees that encroached upon the path. The light came from Argo's fine white hair, shimmering in slow-moving waves, reflecting from Elaine's torch, somehow amplifying and altering it. She had the same feeling she always had when standing in the unicorn's presence. The moments always felt so dreamlike. Argo stood unmoving except for the long mane that dropped to one side of her head and neck. Not one muscle twitched or flinched. Like a stone statue at attention, Argo stood as though waiting for something of her own accord, not the rider's. The long golden headpiece Argo wore was decorated with ornate looping designs reflecting multiple glinting lights. The glint seemed to move along with the wavy glow from the creature's hair. Argo's long, translucent horn protruded out through a thick ring opening at the top of the headpiece. Runes decorated the horn, etched all the way from its base up to its silvery-tipped end. Brid never quite knew what they meant or said, and Elaine never offered to tell her. Argo always freely roamed the area surrounding Western Terrus, only appearing when she was called. Brid was always in awe of her, but to see her, she knew what it ultimately meant. "May Aramis protect," a deep baritone voice said. The voice was not Elaine's voice, but another's, obscured just beyond her line of sight by a thick everwood tree. Elaine faced whoever it was. Another rider it must have been. Of that, Bridain was sure. The Order of Airless Riders only invoked the expression referred to the first-kin Aramis's name, one to another. The very truth that Argo was here already confirmed it to her. But she would keep searching for reasons why it couldn't be so. For Elaine made a promise, and tonight was supposed to be for something else. It was meant to be for Father. As Brid stepped closer, the other rider came into view. He was larger, thick, and muscled, and much older than Elaine. His extremely distressed face couldn't hide enough behind his strong, peppered white beard. He turned to see her and immediately covered his mouth and nose with a bright crimson scarf. The satchel, which held whatever he was meant to deliver, laid heavy at his side. Elaine looked to the man and nodded. "By Aya's grace," Elaine replied. The other man nodded back. The man pulled back the reins on his own unicorn steed. His was much larger than Argo, a sturdy breed more fitting for the man's sturdy frame. His eyes met Brid's for just a moment. They were deep black pools that she could have been lost in for an eternity. She could even see it, tell, in the darkness, a something there. "Griffin," the man said. "Ride." His unicorn clopped its feet sideways until it had turned fully around. It lowered its head, let out a soft whinny, then ran into the night. And they were gone. Brid stood alone with her brother and Argo. Emotions rose. First, puzzled and perplexed, then anger. This was not how tonight was supposed to be. This was not how it had been planned. "Let me guess. She is sending you, isn't she, Magus Nasir?" Brid erupted. Finally, Elaine turned toward her. If his face was a word, it would have been regret. "Brid." "Where? No, wait. Who?" she said. "Who was that? Where was he?" "I'm sorry, little sister," Elaine said. She shuddered. It was all she could do to not erupt at him fully. After all, it wasn't him she was angry with. Not truly. "Why?" she began. "Tonight of all nights. And she has to know." "When we are called, we answer. No questions. I sent a message to your head magister. Did you not receive it?" "No." She was pointed and blunt. If Head Magister Morn hadn't told her, she knew the likely reason why. He would have had no idea she had meant to slip away tonight. Yet still, he withheld it because tomorrow. It was because of tomorrow. Brid's emotions tumbled. She knew this would be a losing battle. She had fought this fight before and she never won. She remembered her father and their last time together. It had been the same always then as here now with Elaine. "I will be back in a fortnight. Before that even." It is but a simple communique. Simple? They are never simple when she sends you. Brid realized her fists were clenched. She hated this feeling. "Where?" Brid, you know I cannot tell you. It must remain secret. My oath. Where? There is much amiss on the horizon that needs to be addressed by all who are privy to such things. He sighed. The regret on his face became obscured by the fog of his breath and floated into the air. She had not noticed, but the night had grown colder. I'm sorry, he said. Did you bring it? Of course I did. Why else would I be here? She threw more than a hint of verbal fire his way. At least one of them intended to honor their plans tonight. Brid reached into her cloak. The vase had been cradled in a small sling set just against her back, just below her ribcage. With 2 hands, she raised it up to him. It was smooth with a shiny glaze that caused it to hold the shimmering glow of the torch and unicorn's subtle glow more than it should. So beautiful, he said. Did you buy this at the market? He loosed his hands from the grips of his reins to take it. The way it catches the hint of the light, do you see it? It was a gift from Father, don't you remember? When he came back from Talos. Ah, he said, I do. The famed craftsmen of Arn truly are the greatest in the Alliance. That was years ago. A vase, now an urn. And a gift to you from him without even knowing its ultimate end. Brid had always suspected her father's gifts upon returning from some far-off places were sourced from guilt more than anything else, especially once Mother had died. She never truly bothered to care why, though. They were always pretty little exotic things from faraway places that only existed for her in his and now Elaine's stories, and she always cherished them, regardless of his intent. Elaine examined it closely, turning and rotating it. His face and all. So intricate, a truly fascinating piece of art. His eyes stopped at the lid. And the letter? Father would be upset by this, she said. She ignored the weak attempt at steering her away from a full-on argument. Elaine grew stern. When kings and queens and men of distinction summon, who are we to deny them? He played dirty. Brid knew them as Father's words, and they were some of the last she had ever heard him say before the end. It felt like a punch to the gut. When she had the feeling of righteousness on her side, then having it snatched away suddenly, being shown she was wrong? Except she wasn't. How dare he use Father's words against her? Father understood duty above all else. We are the ones who give them permission to be kings and queens and men of distinction. We are the reason to deny them, because without us, there would be no them. It was a thing she had always wanted to say to her father when he was alive. She felt awful for saying it now. It reminded her that he was gone, but it also somehow tarnished the fondness of her memories of him. Curse you, Elaine. I choose to think that he'd rather be alive with us here now, she said, to spend one more winter with us than for us to both be out here, standing at the edge of town alone in the darkness. For him, first Mother, then Father, now you. Do what you must, I suppose. Elaine handed the vase back to her. It no longer felt like a beautiful vase. It now felt like a somber urn. Accepting it, for her, felt like a defeat. I miss him too, Brid, Elaine said. He was really leaving. Less than a fortnight, he said. We can do the ceremony when I get back. It will still be a week yet before the Advent trials when I return. Perhaps even sooner. She fumbled for anything to convince him to stay. Her voice now was as cold as the night air. A week from now is not what he wanted, and we'll never get the time back now, will we? Elaine lowered his head, clenched his lips, and let out a heavy, defeated sigh. He breathed, then exhaled again. She knew this. He always did it when he was seeking his calm and center. They command, I follow. You know the way. No, She commands and you follow. No one ever asks of you anything but she. She only asks from all of us. To the pit of the lowest darken with that way. She placed the vase back beneath her cloak. She stopped herself before she said, to the pit of the lowest darken with you. She still had some self-control left at least. Not typical, but some. Elaine pulled tight on the reins again. He laid his hand on the head of Argo, gently stroking the side of the unicorn's face. Before the trials, he said, I promise. He gave a quick glance her way. She was confident it was meant to be reassuring. He always failed at such things. I truly am sorry, Brid. He guided his steed, turning around toward the path leading out from Western Terrus. He tossed his torch to Brid, who caught it with a single outstretched hand. Good luck tomorrow. Father would be proud. And Mother would wonder why I was following down this first-kin, forsaken path, the same as the two of you omox-headed men, Brid responded. She let a hint of softening in. They never held a grudge for longer than a few minutes. She walked closer, looking upward into the eyes of her brother. She lifted her other hand and caressed the side of Argo's face. Take care of him, please, friend. The unicorn let out a slight breath through her nose. She leaned her head into Brid's hand. Elaine, looking down at them both, smiled. I will return. Don't you worry, little bean, he said. Argo, ride. Argo lowered her head. Brid stepped back as suddenly Ryder and his steed charged off into the night. The soft, otherworldly reflective glow of Argo's hair dimmed in the distance. They headed west. That meant likely he was headed toward Traveler's End and perhaps boarding a ship across the sea. At least that much she could gather. At least that little bit. She looked back then toward Western Terrus. This time she didn't care if some creature of the night emerging from the darkness to kill her. She didn't care what happened now. She was alone, again. She hated the solstice and all of its celebrations, and this year, with the Avern trials, it was just a reminder to her of how much she had lost at each turning of the winter. First mother, then father. On the horizon to the east, the dark blanket of night turned a hint even darker. To her, it felt instead like the light would never come again. Then, it was strange. Help me. It was a something. A soft push, a tug at her heart, and a gentle nudge turning her chin, it felt. She looked into the forest. The whisper on the wind. It was soft yet deep, with a gentle, rumbly sound. It didn't scare her, and it did not frighten her. Instead, she focused on her still rising anger. It filled her with rage enough that she forgot about the dark. Her thoughts grew jumbled, her sense wild. She decided in that instant that she no longer cared. Help me. I'll show them, she said. She covered her head, burying her face inside. Retracing her path, she spotted the tracks of the creature once again. It led off the road and into the forest toward the whisper. It was likely a trap, a lure to draw an innocent traveler in. And to the pit of the lowest darken, I curse you, Magus Nasir. Brid looked toward the Orium one last time, then made her way in the opposite direction toward the trees, disappearing into the dark, foreboding forest of night.
Thank you for listening to The First Noel. Sound production by Forge Creation. The First Noel theme by Marianthi Bezaridis. Join our Patreon and Instagram at First Noel Chronicles for news and updates. And please be so wonderful to like, share, and subscribe as we journey through the world of Eos.
Next time, the question.